Sonny decided he was going to take the power from San Bernardino to Oakland, and he became the voice of the Hells Angels.
Two legends, one motorcycle club, a brotherhood that turned into a bitter rivalry spanning decades. Former outlaw biker George Christie reveals what Sonny Barger was really like behind the leather jacket and steel blue eyes that defined the Hells Angels for over half a century. This isn't the sanitized version you've seen in documentaries.
One of the country's most notorious biker gangs has died. Sonny Barger was the founding member of the Hells Angels Oakland chapter.
This is the raw truth from someone who called Barger a brother, who stood beside him at the peak of power, and who watched it all crumble. From secret power struggles to FBI infiltration, from throat cancer battles to murder contracts, the real story of Sonny Barger is darker and more complex than anyone imagined. What Christie reveals will change everything you thought you knew about the most notorious motorcycle club in history. The man behind the myth. Most people see Sonny Barger as the untouchable icon of outlaw culture. George Christie saw something different. He saw the drive, the vision, the absolute refusal to accept the word no. When Christie first encountered Barger in the Hells Angels world, Sonny already carried the weight of legend on his shoulders. But Christie quickly learned that legends are built by real men with real flaws. Barger didn't create the Hells Angels. That's the first myth Christie shatters. The club existed for a full decade before Sonny even walked through the door. On April 1st, 1957, at just 17 years old, Barger co-founded the Oakland charter with a writer named Boots Don Reeves. Boots became the first president, then mysteriously drifted away. Sonny seized the opportunity. What made Barger different was his hunger for control. While other chapters operated loosely, independently, Sonny had bigger plans. He systematically pulled power away from the San Bernardino chapter, the original mother charter, and relocated it to Oakland. His chess moves were calculated. His networking was relentless. By the late 1950s, Sonny Barger had become the face and voice of the entire organization. Christie remembers the sheer force of Barger's personality. The tenacity on that guy, the drive on him, the vision that he had was incredible, Christie recalls. At 70 years old, when most men are planning retirement, Sonny packed his bags, moved to Arizona, took over the Dirty Dozen Motorcycle Club, and transformed them into Arizona Hells Angels. He started completely fresh. That kind of energy, that kind of willpower, didn't come from nowhere. It came from a deep well of ambition that never ran dry. But Christie also saw the darker edges. Barger was conservative, politically rigid, and deeply antagonistic toward anyone who questioned his authority. When anti-war protesters filled the streets of Berkeley in 1965, Sonny and the Angels violently disrupted them. It became national news. Sonny even offered President Lyndon Johnson a fighting unit to send to Vietnam. It was pure publicity theater, but it worked. The Hells Angels brand grew stronger. Christie watched Barger build an empire through calculated media appearances, strategic alliances, and an iron grip on power. But empire building always comes with a price. And in the world of outlaw bikers, that price is often paid in blood, betrayal, and broken brotherhood. The question hanging in the air was simple. How long could one man hold absolute power before others came for it? That question would soon be answered. The cancer that changed everything. In 1982, Sonny Barger received a death sentence. Doctors diagnosed him with throat cancer and gave him mere weeks to live. 3 packs of Camels a day for 3 decades had finally caught up with the most feared man in motorcycle culture. Surgeons removed his vocal cords. His voice, once commanding and sharp, became a hoarse whisper produced through a surgically inserted valve in his throat. The procedure left him unable to speak above a rasp. For the first time in his adult life, Sonny Barger faced mortality. The man who built the Hells Angels into a global organization suddenly couldn't talk without mechanical assistance. The psychological impact was devastating. More importantly, the power vacuum it created sent shockwaves through the entire club. Barger made a decision that would haunt him for years. He relinquished his power. Christie explains that in the outlaw world, once you give up power, Getting it back becomes nearly impossible. Sonny turned over control to two men, Michael O'Farrell, known as Irish, who became president of Oakland, and George Christie, who held the reins in Southern California as president of the Ventura Charter. Irish was a tough-as-nails outlaw from the Los Angeles area. Christie describes him as ruggedly handsome with long, thick brown hair and sad, soulful eyes. He was fast with his fists and a legendary street fighter. When Sonny needed someone to hold Oakland together while he fought cancer, Irish was the obvious choice. Christie, meanwhile, became the public voice of the organization. He carried the Olympic torch in the 1984 Los Angeles Games, bringing unprecedented mainstream attention to the club. The dynamic shifted completely. Barger, who expected to die within months, watched from the sidelines as Irish and Christie stepped into the spotlight. They handled media interviews. They made strategic decisions. They became the faces of the Hells Angels. And then something unexpected happened. Sonny didn't die. Months turned into a year. The year stretched into several. Against all medical odds, Barger survived. He learned to speak again through that valve in his throat. His strength slowly returned. But the landscape had fundamentally changed. Irish ran Oakland with an iron fist. Christie commanded respect across California. The organization had moved forward without Sonny Barger at the helm. Now, Barger faced a new battle, one far more dangerous than cancer. He wanted his power back. But Irish and Christie had grown comfortable in leadership. The stage was set for a conflict that would tear the Brotherhood apart from within. The informant among brothers. While Barger fought to reclaim his throne, a more immediate threat lurked inside the organization. His name was Anthony Tate, though most Angels knew him as Tony. He was the West Coast Sergeant at Arms, a position of significant trust and responsibility. What nobody knew was that Tony Tate was an FBI informant. The operation was codenamed Caicus, after the demon in Dante's Inferno who ruled the circle of hell reserved for thieves. FBI agent Tim McKinley orchestrated the entire sting. Only 8 FBI agents and 2 ATF agents knew about Tate's true identity. They kept the circle deliberately small to prevent corruption. Past investigations had failed because government officials routinely sold information to the Angels. This time, McKinley would take no chances. Tate wore wires to club meetings. He recorded conversations. He made documented purchases of weapons, explosives, and drugs directly from Hells Angels members. His swagger and apparent success as a drug dealer allowed him to become the Angels' point man for the entire West Coast. He met with Sonny Barger numerous times, all while gathering evidence. In August 1986, a Hells Angel named John Cleve Webb was murdered by 2 Outlaws members in Louisville, Kentucky. Barger appointed Tate to lead the retaliation campaign. This assignment nearly derailed the entire FBI operation. Under American law, informants cannot commit murders, and their handlers cannot permit murders to occur. Tate's handlers scrambled to manage the situation. At an Oakland chapter meeting on August 17, 1986, Barger discussed identification numbers and home addresses of Outlaws leaders. He displayed a secret manual from the El Paso Information Center, a law enforcement database meant only for police officers. The fact that Barger possessed this classified information alarmed Tate's handlers. It proved how deeply police corruption ran. But here's where Christie's instincts saved him. Tate approached Christie, trying to get approval to dynamite some outlaws. Christie never liked the guy. Something felt wrong. He consulted with David Ortega, an old-school member known as Question Mark. After multiple discussions, Ortega finally said, "I don't like the way he parts his hair." It was old-school code for trust your gut. Christie refused to give Tate permission. He got in Tate's face and shut him down. Tate then went to Sonny Barger, and Sonny, still trying to reassert his authority, gave the green light. "Yeah, blow them up," Barger said. That decision would send Sonny Barger to federal prison and alter the course of Hells Angels history forever. The trial that shook Oakland. In July 1988, 10 Hells Angels went on trial in Louisville federal court. The charges were explosive: conspiracy to bomb Outlaws clubhouses in retaliation for John Webb's murder, Around 100 Hells Angels wearing full colors attended every day of the trial. Country singer Johnny Paycheck showed up to support Barger. The U.S. Marshal Service provided heavy security. Assistant U.S. attorneys were deputized to carry guns inside the courthouse. Anthony Tate, the FBI's star witness, was housed in a safe house in the Louisville suburb of Prospect, guarded by an FBI SWAT team around the clock. His testimony laid bare the inner workings of the Hells Angels. The prosecution presented the club as a highly organized criminal operation ruled by a code of silence, involved in drug trafficking, shootings, and bombings. The trial became the longest in the history of the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Kentucky, lasting 3 months. The total cost exceeded $1 million. Barger reportedly celebrated his 50th birthday during the trial by partying and smoking marijuana at the home of one of the defense attorneys in Goshen, Kentucky. His defiance was trademark Sonny. On October 28, 1988, the verdict came down. Barger and Irish O'Farrell were convicted on felony charges of conspiracy to transport and receive explosives in interstate commerce with intent to kill and damage buildings. Judge Edward H. Johnstone sentenced Barger to prison. The man who built the Hells Angels empire would now watch it continue from behind bars. Christie, who had refused to participate in Tate's schemes, remained free. His gut instinct had proven correct, but freedom came with its own complications. With Sonny in prison and Irish convicted alongside him, Christie's influence grew even stronger. He became the de facto leader of the West Coast operation. Back in Oakland, Cisco Valderrama took over as chapter president. Cisco was very powerful, very connected, and very smart. He ran Oakland with precision while Barger served his sentence. Meanwhile, Irish O'Farrell prepared to report to the United States Penitentiary in Atlanta, but Irish would never make it to federal prison. 2 weeks before his scheduled surrender date on June 6, 1989, Irish was drinking at the Halfway Club in San Leandro, California. An Aryan Brotherhood member recognized him as the man who had beaten him 2 months earlier over a drug debt. The Brotherhood member ambushed Irish outside the bar. He stabbed O'Farrell 5 times in the back, once in the chest, once in the neck, then shot him 4 times from behind with a .25 caliber pistol. Irish died in the parking lot. The streets had claimed another casualty. Power without a crown. Irish's murder sent shockwaves through the organization. He was supposed to be untouchable, a living legend with fists of steel and a reputation that preceded him into every room. Instead, he died bleeding out on grimy asphalt over a drug debt. The message was clear: nobody was truly safe. Sonny Barger sat in prison watching his carefully constructed world shift beneath his feet. Irish was dead. Cisco ran Oakland with surgical precision, and George Christie had become the most powerful Hells Angel in California, possibly in the entire country. Christie held the unofficial position of West Coast chairman, keeping operations running smoothly across multiple charters. But Christie's role came with a critical distinction. He had no formal authority. The Hells Angels structure doesn't recognize national leadership positions. Each charter operates autonomously. Yet through force of personality, strategic alliances, and sheer competence, Christie became what law enforcement called the second in command to Barger. Police reports from 1997 stated it plainly. When Sonny Barger dies, George Christie and the Oakland president will fight for the top position. When Barger finally walked out of prison in the late 1990s, he returned to a completely different organization. The dynamic had fundamentally changed. Cisco commanded absolute respect in Oakland. Christie wielded enormous influence across the West Coast. Younger members had never known the club under Barger's iron-fisted control. They knew the stories, the legends, but they hadn't lived through them. Sonny wanted to write books. He wanted Hollywood movies made about his life. He wanted to monetize the Hells Angels brand in ways that would make him wealthy and famous. But the club had voted in the late 1960s to never work with movie companies or actors again after getting burned. The last official project was Sandy Alexander's documentary, Hells Angels Forever, which Christie had worked on as an executive producer before Sandy went to prison. Barger kept getting shot down. Oakland rejected his proposals. The national membership resisted his vision for commercialization. For a man who had spent decades as the undisputed face of the organization, the rejection stung deeply. Christie recalls the arguments. Sonny and George would clash over politics, over the direction of the club, over what the Hells Angels should become in the modern era. The tension grew. Barger felt his authority slipping. Christie felt pressure from all sides. And beneath it all ran a current of something more personal, more bitter. These weren't just policy disagreements. This was a battle of egos between two men who had once been brothers. The question was, who would break first? The move to Arizona. Some people claim that Sonny Barger didn't just leave Oakland, he fled. At nearly 70 years old, after 4 decades building the Angels into a global phenomenon, Barger packed his belongings and moved to Arizona in October 1998. The official story was that he wanted to step back from leadership. The real story was far more complicated. Christie witnessed the dissolution of Sonny's marriage firsthand. Court papers filed when Noel Barger filed for divorce in April 2003 revealed stunning financial details. Barger made over $330,000 in royalties from his autobiography in 2001 alone. The next year brought $340,000. In 2003, another $230,000. 20th Century Fox paid him $150,000 for film rights. Sonny Barger had become a brand, a product, a commercial enterprise. But success bred resentment within the club. Members complained that Barger cared only about promoting himself, his books, his movies, his products. One police officer told reporters, "You can't be the heir apparent if Sonny continues calling the shots and running things. Sonny didn't leave, and people are still in battle with that." Other Hells Angels leaders, including Christie, were described by journalists as rivals waiting for Barger to die. The Dirty Dozen Motorcycle Club in Arizona presented Sonny with an opportunity. They were described by ATF agents as the largest and most violent gang in the state. They had successfully beaten off attempts by the Mongols, Vagos, and Devil's Disciples to establish Arizona chapters. Barger praised them as friends and allies. During a meeting in Oakland, the Angels voted to absorb the Dirty Dozen. Barger transferred from Oakland to the newly formed Cave Creek Charter. Law enforcement analyst Eve Levine wrote in 1999, "The Hells Angels obviously have big plans for Arizona. Sonny Barger would not pull up roots after 40 years in the Bay Area on a whim. Talks of his retirement are premature." The move accomplished several goals. It removed Barger from the power struggle in California. It gave him a fresh start where his word was law. It allowed him to build a new empire without Christie and Cisco looking over his shoulder. And it positioned him to legitimize the gang in the business world from the desert state. Christie understood the subtext. Sonny had lost the battle for Oakland. Rather than accept diminished status, he chose to start over. It was vintage Barger. When you can't win the game, change the board. But the move didn't heal the wounds. If anything, it deepened them. Brothers turned rivals. The relationship between Christie and Barger deteriorated into something toxic. These weren't disagreements between brothers anymore. This was warfare conducted through intermediaries, through politics, through subtle manipulations that only insiders understood. Christie admits there was a period when he looked up to Sonny, when he genuinely respected the man's vision and leadership. But that period had ended. One of the breaking points came from Christie's approach to rival clubs. When Christie went to federal prison at FCY Terminal Island in the 1980s, he asked a brother on the yard, "Who do we have problems with in here?" The answer shocked him. "We don't fight in prison." Clubs that were mortal enemies on the streets interacted peacefully behind bars. The revelation changed Christie's entire perspective. After his release in 1987, Christie started reaching out to rival organizations. He negotiated truces with the Outlaws. He talked with the Bandidos. He even spoke with the Pagans multiple times. Christie's vision was peace, or at least peaceful coexistence that would reduce the bloodshed. His thinking was strategic. Wars cost money, lives, and attention from law enforcement. Peace was good business. Barger saw it differently. His interest didn't extend beyond his own orbit. He wanted control, dominance, the thrill of being feared. Christie's peace talks undermined that image. When Christie attended negotiations with Outlaw's president Harry Taco Bowman in Florida in December 1992, and again in May 1993, he was trying to end years of violence. The proposed treaty fell apart when Bowman's lieutenant, Kevin "Spike" O'Neill, convinced him that agreeing to a ceasefire would make the Outlaws appear weak. This would prove problematic for Barger and Christie. In early 1995, Bowman allegedly placed a $100,000 bounty on Barger's life. He sent a team of Outlaws members to California to conduct surveillance ahead of an assassination attempt on either Barger or Christie. Federal agents intercepted details of the plot on a wiretap. 3 Outlaws hit squad members were arrested in Ventura after planning Christie's assassination. The turf war ended that spring due to concerns about federal surveillance. The approach to rival clubs wasn't the only thing they differed about. Christie and Barger also clashed over politics. Barger was deeply conservative, almost Republican in his worldview. Christie had different ideas about where the club should go. "I couldn't stand him," Christie would later say about their political arguments. The words carried weight because they came from a place of deep frustration. These were 2 alpha males occupying the same territory, and only one could truly lead. The final years. By the 2000s, the split between Christie and Barger had become public knowledge. Law enforcement reports detailed the power struggle. Media outlets wrote about the tension. Within the club, members chose sides. Oakland remained loyal to Barger's legacy. Ventura followed Christie's vision. The organization that prided itself on brotherhood was fracturing along fault lines created by ego and ambition. In 1998, Christie hosted the Hells Angels World Run in Ventura to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the club's founding. More than 100 Angels from the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and Europe attended. The event was a massive honor, widely interpreted as a signal that Christie was Barger's successor. Police reports from that period stated, "George Christie continues to be the main man on the West Coast." But hosting the World Run also painted a target on Christie's back. Members who wanted to curry favor with Barger began undermining Christie's authority. Younger Angels in the Ventura Charter, recruited from skateboard culture and street gangs, created friction with older members. One Arizona Angel complained to an undercover policeman about the Ventura chapter's younger members. "That's bullshit. These guys are an embarrassment." Christie's recruiting strategy had brought different types of people into the club with different goals and different ways of looking at things. The nucleus he had formed was spinning out of control. Internal problems mounted. Federal investigations intensified. Finally, in 2011, Christie made the decision to retire from the Hells Angels after more than 3 decades of service. Scott Sutton, the Ventura chapter president who took over after Christie, claimed George retired because he was on the brink of being expelled for abuse of power. Christie tells a different story. He believed the club had become too combative and that the resulting aggression would eventually turn inward. He returned his patch to avoid being consumed by the violence he saw coming. Barger immediately placed Christie in a state of disgrace. He banned all Hells Angels from having any social contact with George. The excommunication was total and absolute. Christie states he wasn't in fear for his life, but he was concerned. In August 2011, Christie was arrested on charges of ordering the firebombings of 2 tattoo shops in 2007. He would eventually serve 18 months in federal prison from 2013 to 2014. The former brothers had become enemies. Decades of shared history, of riding together, of building an empire together, all reduced to bitterness and betrayal. The outlaw life demands loyalty above all else. But what happens when loyalty conflicts with survival? The call before the end. On June 28, 2022, George Christie's phone rang late at night. The voice on the other end belonged to someone Christie couldn't identify publicly, a Hells Angel who risked everything by maintaining contact despite Barger's prohibition. The caller asked, "Do you recognize this voice?" Christie, teasing, replied, "Yeah, isn't this my rabbi?" The conversation that followed would be the last connection between Christie and the world Sonny Barger had built. The caller delivered a message that cut through years of animosity. If you and Ralph are going to reconcile, you better do it now because he's not going to be around much longer. Ralph. That's what insiders called Sonny Barger. The man behind the myth, the human being underneath the legend. Barger was 83 years old. Liver cancer was destroying him. After surviving throat cancer in 1982, prostate cancer in 2012, and countless other battles, his body was finally giving out. He had fought longer than anyone expected. He had outlived Irish, outlasted enemies, and maintained his position as the face of the Hells Angels for over half a century. But cancer doesn't respect legends. Christie stayed awake that night drinking coffee and thinking about everything that had transpired. The brotherhood they once shared, the power struggles, the betrayals, the moments of genuine respect before it all turned toxic. He thought about whether reconciliation was possible after so much bad blood. He thought about what it would mean to reach out to a dying man who had excommunicated him from the only family he had known for decades. Sonny Barger died the next day, June 29th, 2022. He passed at his home in Livermore, California, surrounded by his fourth wife, Zorana, and other loved ones. A message posted on his Facebook page, written by Barger before his death, read, "If you are reading this message, you'll know that I'm gone. I've lived a long and good life filled with adventure, and I've had the privilege to be part of an amazing club." Christie never got the chance to reconcile. The opportunity died with Sonny, but the call prompted something else. It motivated Christie to start writing a new book called Crossing the Rubicon, where he would tell the private, personal stories about life inside the Hells Angels. Stories about the real Sonny Barger, not the legend, not the myth, but the flawed, complicated, driven man who changed motorcycle culture forever. What do you think about the relationship between George Christie and Sonny Barger? Do you think their relationship could ever have been repaired? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from the outlaw world.